Welcome to the Tech Story podcast, a podcast where we interview interesting founders and people in tech, growing successful businesses. Today, I'm very excited to welcome Felix Atkin on the show. Felix is the founder and CEO of Sharesy, a venue hire platform which allows you to hire spaces for your communities. Thank you very much, Felix, for taking the time for being on the show. Would you like to introduce yourself and share a bit of background?
Sure. So thank you for having me. I'm Felix. I'm the founder of Sharesy. I started this business in 2020 at the height of lockdown. Seems like a crazy time to be starting a venue hire business, but my background has been in tech, starting in really big corporates like BT, working for steadily smaller businesses. I worked at Sony PlayStation for some time, spent some time in startups, and this is the first business that I founded myself.
Congrats. And I also started to legislate during lockdown, but now we're out of it. I also find that it was a lot more quieter and more peaceful in 2020, and now it feels like everything's happening. And sometimes I do look back and wish we could go back in lockdown to.
It feels like a very long time ago, and it's right, life was very different. But then starting a business in those early days, it was defining the proposition, taking our first investment. We soft launched at the end of lockdown one with a very early product just to see if people would start booking a local space. And we worked with a local school, started taking bookings straight away. And of course, lockdown two kicked in straight away. We went out and raised more money, having had some early success. Raised some money really quickly, ended up raising £750,000 in about 6 weeks. So we had really nice feedback. But lockdown two lasted until the summer of 2021. So we didn't really soft launch until August 2021. And then, of course, lockdown three came along. So we properly launched Sharesy around February 2022. And so we're really just over a year through now, and it feels like a lot's happened in that time.
I imagine those lockdowns must have been pretty stressful.
Lockdown was difficult, partly from my own personal circumstances, that my son became a bit unwell during that period. We'd just taken our second round of investment. We ended up spending 6 weeks in Great Ormond Street. So that kind of threw our lives upside down. But things have really settled down since then. But yes, it feels like a world away now.
That's great to hear, and sorry about your son, but glad all is better. And I guess throughout this process then, or journey, what's been your favourite moment so far?
It's a really interesting one. So I would say I'm not very good at celebrating wins. We have had some really exciting moments. Having moments with the team. We've got a lovely team. Getting people together has always been amazing. We have had some great off-site moments where we've been together. We hired a manor house for a couple of days and spent some time together doing some strategy thinking. That was a real highlight. But actually, it's just when you have a really great month and everybody can feel part of that, that's really exciting as well. So just those moments, we don't always stop to really think about those and to celebrate them, but we should do more of that.
Yeah, I definitely am responsible for not celebrating wins enough, and I think it is important to get that momentum because ultimately startups are tough, and you need to celebrate wins to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely.
And what do you wish you'd known before starting Sharesy?
I started Sharesy as a sole founder. It can be quite lonely, having to have my name on the bottom of every document. The responsibility ultimately stops with me. But I think, the learning from that has been to put smart people around me, and that has been incredibly valuable for me. But I think probably the relentless pressure. If you achieve a goal, you might stop and think about that goal and feel really good about that. But in fact, you just look up to the next goal. And in a startup, things are growing so fast and the expectations just increase and increase that you never really get a chance to stop and take a breath. So I might take some time off from work, but I'm never switching off really. And you know, that's been an interesting learning. No regrets, but it's been challenging.
Yeah, I guess from a mental health perspective, it's quite difficult to balance. When you're a founder, you never switch off. And
no, and you have to try and find times for yourself. You have to try and find those moments for yourself. For me, that's exercising. When I'm having a workout, I can't be thinking about work. I just have to think about that. And actually, I find that very meditative. It sort of clears my mind. But every other time, you know, I've got things on my mind, and sometimes it can be hard to, you know, to find that balance.
I saw you've got a black belt in kickboxing, so
I do, yeah. I studied kickboxing for about 10 years. I had quite a few injuries from that, but learned a lot as well. It's probably the most challenging thing I've ever done personally. Absolutely loved it. Yeah, I'd love to be able to keep that up into my older age.
And are there any sort of skills that you've learned and acquired that apply to startups?
From kickboxing? Well, I am not a very aggressive person. So, you know, going into a ring and having to fight against someone that wants to knock your head off, you know, it takes a bit of composure, and, you know, being able to be in jeopardy and feel the danger actually is very challenging. And that, I think, was a real learning experience, being able to just slow things down. And I combated that by really trying to focus on the technical side. And I learned to really enjoy it. You know, the kickboxing that I was doing was technical. I was doing, you know, competitions, but not like really high level competitions. But I enjoyed it a lot. And it was yeah, a big part of my life for a long time.
I mean, I briefly tried a commercialized version of kickboxing workouts, and it was my first introduction to high intensity workouts, and I did find that it was so intense, or that if you actually stopped, you might injure yourself, that you had to really focus, which meant that you did switch off, which is what I really enjoyed. But unfortunately, the kickboxing, which is just, I don't know if you saw it coming in, it's just opposite the building, they closed down. So
okay, well, my gym was called Spring Health, so a shout out to them in Camden, and Adi Kinger, who is the head coach there, yeah, being part of that family was fantastic.
Great. Well, I guess, yeah, look, key insight is, as a founder, you need to switch off, and whether that's sport or something else,
absolutely
you need to. Great. And you've been growing Sharesy now 3 years. What's the vision for the next 5 years?
We are a venue hire platform for community space. It's a really underserved group. So we work with primary schools and secondary schools, but, you know, state funded and really struggling for income. We work with places of worship like churches and other community centres. You know, there are a huge number of those across the UK and beyond that really struggle to generate an income and to connect with their local community. They don't always have the time and maybe the skill set to be able to manage lettings and to do the marketing and so on. So ultimately, we would like to become the go-to platform for hiring out any of those local spaces. And, you know, the feedback so far has been fantastic. So we just want to continue to grow.
And I guess, what type of space is your most popular space on the platform?
Probably the most popular space is a hall space, a church hall, a school hall. They're used for all sorts of things, from taekwondo classes to language courses to choir practice and business meetings. Really, it's about bringing people together in their local community. Go and use a local space. You don't necessarily need to go and use a big commercial space when you could be putting your money back into your local area. And that's really resonated with people. The feedback from that has been fantastic.
That's great. And are you right now across the UK, London? Where are you?
We've continued to be very focused. So we started out in North London, in the Barnet area. We're now across 22 local authorities, and the vision is to become, to be across the whole of the UK in the coming years. Right now, we are more focused on the southeast, but actually, we're getting requests to come onto the platform from across the country. So that's really fantastic that people are discovering us and they're coming to us now.
That's really exciting. And as a busy founder, and I guess also if you're, managing these venues and clients, you must come across quite a few contracts. What are the key contracts or legal documents that you interact with the most?
So I'm responsible for all of the contracts at Sharesy. So there's been a huge amount of learning there for me. From a business point of view, the terms and conditions, so we have three-way terms between Sharesy and our bookers who are transacting on our platform, between Sharesy and our host venues, but we also provide the venue terms between the higher terms, between the venue and the booker. So making sure that those are really relevant, easily understandable, is very important. From an employment point of view, having employment contracts, thinking about EMI schemes and things like that are, of course, very important as well. All the way down to having NDAs and in place. So as a founder, when I first set out, I really thought there was huge value in having an NDA. In fact, what I've learned is that perhaps it's less important and it's more important just to get out there and go fast. But we do quite often work with organisations that would require an NDA. There are circumstances where we might want to put an NDA in place. So it's about being flexible with those and accommodating to that.
And with, for example, NDAs, do you find that there's pushback on certain clauses or terms?
Generally not. Sometimes working with a larger organisation, they would insist on using their documentation, in which case it's always useful to have an experienced eye look over it. But for the most part, no. We have templated documents which we use when we're providing NDAs to a third party. So no, we tend to find that that's pretty smooth.
Great. And you were saying earlier that you made the conscious decision very early on to invest in legal, for example, through a law firm. Mm-hmm. What was sort of the reasoning behind that, and what tips or recommendations would you give to prospective founders about investing in legal? Was it worth it?
So my experience has been that investing in the foundations early on really pays off. Partly because it gives you confidence in your own documents to really understand your contract, which is incredibly important. But also, if you can get into the detail on a contract, you can then make it simple for everybody to understand. And that's really important for me, is that there's nothing that's hidden or covert in any way. It should all be really transparent and easy to understand. So, and of course, investing in a document, making sure that you've got the foundations there, preempts any problems that you might have. So it's quite often the case that you might discover a problem and then you go and ask for advice from a lawyer. But in fact, if you can go before the problem, then you can be preventative as well. So getting that right, I think, is really important. And of course, not every document, not every standard document is right for every business. So being able to really understand your own needs as a business and setting out your own template documents, for me, that's been important, because then I can, my own ethos around the business can then be written into the documents.
Yeah, great. Well, I mean, that's definitely something at Legislate. We've been fortunate to have a legal advisor from the beginning to provide all the templates, but you can't just get an off-the-shelf template or download it or borrow it from a founder friend, because every business is unique, and there might be some nuances to the business that aren't reflected in the template, and that's why it's really important just to have documents which are customized to your needs.
And also just to be able to be flexible. So, in any agreement between two parties, then there may be different needs, things may come up, the ability to be flexible and accommodating. There may be one particular clause that's particularly important to one side or the other, and to be able to be flexible on those things, I think is really helpful. It supports the relationship, it shows willingness on both sides. But to be able to resolve those issues without having to spend a huge amount of time and cost to be able to get those right is for an early stage business really important.
Yeah, and I think one thing we've noticed is if you don't invest in legal early on, you're effectively acquiring legal debt, which will need to be fixed one day.
That's my attitude, is that if there's something I don't fully understand, or if there's something that I think could potentially become a problem, I could just kick it down the road and then address it when I need to address it, or I could say, actually, I'm going to address it now. And so coming from a background of business development and partnerships, coming to an agreement with a third party, I've always seen the value in having really clear heads of terms, make sure that everybody's completely agreed on those things. Then when you actually put it into an agreement, there shouldn't be any surprises. If there are surprises, then both sides haven't communicated well. So the idea is that, for me, it has always been get to the point where you can have an agreement, then it's just the formality of getting the agreement put in place. Of course, that's simplifying, but and there are always circumstances where that may change.
And I agree. If you can sort of agree on the heads of terms, then it really simplifies the negotiation.
And I would say that I've made mistakes as well in my journey at Sharesy and in previous roles. I might have overlooked a particular point, or maybe didn't have heads of terms locked down clearly enough, and then it's opened up questions later on. And I think rather than digging deeper and sort of or digging your heels in and saying this is my position, actually trying to be accommodating at that point, trying to understand the challenges on both sides and where the worries are, and then trying to overcome them together, helps the relationship, it builds the relationship, and then when you actually have all the documents signed, you're ready to then move forward and in a really positive way.
Yeah, well, I think that's lots of great advice and tips for I guess current and prospective founders listening to the show. And if, for example, you were to receive a contract to sign today, what would impress you?
I would say, there are a few things. First of all, no surprises. If we've had a conversation before, I would want to make sure that it just accurately reflects the conversation that we've had. Simple language, if it's lawyer talking to lawyer, then maybe that can be a more technical conversation. But for a founder like me, if I'm talking to a third party, I want to try and keep things very simple, and the language should be easily understandable. But also, I think just an understanding on both sides that you've taken some time to understand the other party's business, and they've taken time to understand yours. So there's a willingness to sort of to maybe adapt a little bit there. And that's when I found that time has been taken on both sides. Those are the easy contracts. Things go very smoothly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we've definitely, when we've provided templates, tried to simplify the language so that it's easy to understand for non-lawyers. But also we've tried to present the information in the contracts through questions and answers as a way of also educating users around what's in the contract and what it means.
Absolutely. So we've had something similar, or I've used cheat sheets where you could have a really simple summary of the terms that are in that document. Everybody knows what it contains. If you want to go deeper into that, you can, but at least you have something very easy that you can access that can guide you on it.
Yeah, no, that's great piece of advice. And I'm conscious, Felix, I've already taken a lot of your time, so I'm going to ask you the closing question we ask all our guests. So you're on the Tech Story podcast. What's your favorite tech product?
Is this a device or is this a software?
It can be anything.
Do you know, it's probably a really boring answer, but the device that I carry everywhere is my MacBook. I actually have a MacBook Air now. I've tried all sorts of different devices, and I just keep finding my way back to it. That I find that I'm just fastest on it. I've tried working on iPads or desktops and all sorts, but it's the device that's always with me. So probably that. But if I was to say a software, interestingly, what I try and encourage my team to do is to become power users in every software that you use. Because in fact, if you invest a bit of extra time to become a really good user of a software, there's so much that you can get from that. And I need to be better at that myself. But the latest one actually is Slack. There's so much you can do in Slack. It's easy to have a superficial relationship with Slack and just use it for direct messaging, but it goes a lot deeper than that. So having fun with that right now.
Yeah, I've been playing with various Slack bots or using Zapier to connect our various platforms with Slack.
Yeah.
Because I agree. I think because, I mean, I love software and we use probably too many software platforms in the company, but you can't necessarily log into all of them, but you can make them communicate via Slack to bring all the information you need to know.
Yeah, we use Slack for all of our quick wins.
Yeah.
Whenever a new venue signs up or we have some progress in a particular part of the business, we have alerts that everybody can celebrate. Yeah. Lots of small ways that we can, keep close together.
Yeah, no, it's a great platform, and I guess you use it also for support, or
we actually use Zendesk for support. We tend to use that for support, but actually, yeah, the same. We use a number of different softwares, but that's just one that came to mind.
Yeah, no, it's a great platform, and I also love the MacBook Airs. So. Great. Well, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Best of luck growing Sharesy.
Yeah, and the same to you.